Hello friend, Zachary Stockill here from retroactivejealousy.com, and today I'm answering a reader question from Tiffany. Tiffany writes, my number one question is how do I stop looking on social media and trust that my husband isn't talking to his exes? So thanks for your question, Tiffany. Part of the reason I wanted to start doing these Q&A videos, I've been doing these regularly now for over 2 months, I think. But part of the reason I wanted to start doing this is to get better at speaking briefly and trying to condense big ideas down to a very short, digestible format. Naturally, this presents some challenges, especially when faced with a question like this, because even though maybe on the surface your question might look somewhat simple, how do I do X? How do I stop doing Y? It's actually pretty complicated, and there's a lot going on in this question. That said, as usual, I'm going to try to boil this down. There's a few things that I could suggest here. On the one hand, there's the practical element to your question, which is basically how do I stop spending time on social media? So aside from the issue of you're worried about your husband looking, perhaps talking to his exes on social media, there's just the issue of social media in general. Anyone who's familiar with my work, my guidebook, my online course, my private Facebook community knows that I'm big on trying to limit your time on social media. Personally, I find social media, for the most part, a massive time suck. I don't use Facebook pretty much at all, aside from talking to students in my private Facebook group and messaging with friends using Messenger. That's about it. I use Instagram a little bit. I'll check Twitter maybe once a day. But in general, it's just a really good idea to limit your time on social media generally, especially if you have any struggles around retroactive jealousy. I probably don't have to tell anyone watching this that social media can present some real problems for retroactive jealousy sufferers. So there are practical tools that you can use. There's different extensions. You can use browser extensions, as well as on your phone. You can, make certain adjustments that way to literally shut off social media once you're on it for, half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever. There's also specific things you can do to actually block certain profiles, and the person's profile who you're blocking, they don't have to know about it at all. So all of these things, unfollowing, blocking, using applications to limit your time, these are all practical suggestions that can actually really help. I think I wrote a whole article about this actually, and I'll post an article to that in the description. Please take a look at that if you're having any struggles around social media use. But really the meat of your question relates to trust. So how do you build trust? How do you sustain trust? And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some projecting going on. I mean, I don't know, your story, your email was very brief, but generally speaking, people who struggle with this issue, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they've been burned in the past. They had an ex-partner who was kind of sketchy and, talking to exes and acting inappropriately. Maybe they've been cheated on. So first, be sure you're not projecting. This is a huge topic. I could spend an hour on projection alone. Maybe I'll do another video on that sometime. But just first, be sure you're not projecting, the actions of someone else or the behavior of someone else onto your husband. And obviously, you need to ask yourself, and you need to really spend some time considering, do I trust my husband? And if not, why? So there could be 1,000,001 different reasons as far as why you don't trust your husband. Has he broken your trust in the past? Are you facing a crisis in your marriage where you feel like he might be looking outside of the relationship for validation or attention or affection or whatever? Has he given you reasons not to trust him in the past? These are all questions you can ask. And sometimes people ask me questions as they relate to retroactive jealousy. And unfortunately, I'm forced to tell them, there's nothing you can do in this situation. Not really. If your partner is genuinely violating your trust after you've already established some very firm boundaries, you've communicated well with them, told them what is not okay and what is okay, and you've let them know how you feel, and they're still violating your boundaries, you can't make someone change. It really comes down to taking ownership of your own actions, your own emotions, your own behavior, and that's about it, because you can't make other people change. However, if you found my work, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm willing to bet that your suspicions around your husband are probably based mostly on fiction rather than fact. The overwhelming majority of people who find me, their jealousy doesn't have a great basis in fact. It's not really related to anything that's actually going on. Their partner isn't actually going behind their back and acting sketchy and doing all these things. Their jealousy is mostly a figment of their imagination. And I realize this can be really tough. I realize this is easier said than done. But ultimately in relationships, that's really the choice that we're all faced with. The choice to live or not. The choice to love or not. The choice to trust or not. My mother gave me some great advice back in the day where she said basically, trust someone until they give you a reason not to trust them. And if that person's already given you a reason not to trust them, hopefully, you can work together to start rebuilding that trust through open and honest communication and a mutual airing of grievances and, really getting down to the nitty-gritty of how this breach of trust occurred and how we're going to prevent it moving forward. But ultimately, Tiffany, it's on you to decide each and every day to trust your husband, to trust what he tells you, to trust his reassurance, to trust his love, to trust his affection, to trust his fidelity. And this is an active process, but the good news is, the more you do this, the more you just decide to throw caution to the wind, so to speak, and trust someone, the easier it becomes. And you can kind of, look back on your relationship and remember all of the reasons your husband gave you to trust him, Think about times when, he's demonstrated to you, maybe for years, that he is trustable, that he's not going around behind your back. Or you can even look to just moments in your relationship where he's confirmed his love for you, his desire, his affection, Look to that stuff. And in moments when you're feeling distrustful and you have nothing to be distrustful about, reflect on those moments, reflect on all the reasons you have that you can actually trust your husband. Above all, trust someone until they give you a reason not to trust them. So thanks very much for your note, Tiffany. I hope you found this helpful. If any of you watching found this helpful, please be sure to click the like button below. Also be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you again very soon.